To understand politics is to understand the very fundamental thing that there are two types of people. In every country, there are two types of people in the world. Others call them the left and the right. Others call them progressive, liberals, and conservatives. But to simplify it, there are two types of people in the world when it comes to politics. Number one is the traditional person that doesn't want a lot of things to change. They believe what they see with their eyes, and for the most part, they want things to stay the same because that's the tested and trusted way of a successful country. And that is what they understand. So that box is a traditional person. That person believes in traditional values. They want things to remain the same, not much change. That's one person. The other side is the person who wants change. They call it progressive, they call it liberal, they call it freedom. But this is the person that wants change. And life has shown us that life always favors, although not necessarily favors, the only thing that's guaranteed in life is change. The person that wants change wants to move away from how things were done traditionally. Let me use an example. A traditional person, let's use gender. A traditional person will say there are two genders in this world. There's the male and there's the female. That is what tradition is. That is what life is. That's what's been tried and tested. That is something that doesn't change. That's what's natural. Remember, there's a traditional person. That's their point of view. The liberal, the progressive, the person who wants change will come and say, yes, I was born with this thing in between my legs that all males have, but I am a woman. Progressive change. Let me highlight, this video is not about judging people or saying, hey, this person is that. I'm just trying to show something in terms of what types of people there are in politics. There's two types of people, like I said, the traditional and the one that wants change. And I was using an example of the traditional person seeing that there's only two genders in the world. There's tradition, that's what we all know in terms of growing up and. But the one that wants change will say, yes, I have a penis, but I identify as a woman. LGBTQI and. Right? That's an example of the gender, the traditional person and the person who wants change. So that person who's traditional will vote for or will be aligned to a party that's more traditional, and the one that wants change will be aligned to a party that wants change, or that doesn't judge them, or that accepts them, and. Another example would be an Afrikaner, or the so-called Afrikaner, will say, I am African. The traditional African will say that's impossible. Your ancestral land is in Europe. Therefore, it's impossible for you to be African. Because your ancestral land is in Europe, and because you're a descendant of colonizers, it's not possible for you to be African because African is a certain color. It's widely known. This is tradition. This is where we come from. This is what our eyes tell us. That's what a traditional person will say. The progressive or liberal person would say, no. I was born in this land, therefore I am African. And they will align with what agrees with what they're saying, as much as the traditional person in such a case would align with Africa for Africans type of a situation. These are examples, and I know they're very touchy. Some people will get hot underneath the collar and become emotional about it, but I'm just using examples of different types of people who think in different ways. Another example, there's a traditional person who says South Africa is for South Africans. And there's the liberal person who's saying, I'm coming from another country and I also see myself as now South African. And I have rights in this country. And I will fight for my rights to be part of this country. Then there's a clash between the traditional view and the view for change. I said it's two separations. To understand politics, you must see first the person that's traditional. And the tradition can be a certain topic. It can't necessarily or won't necessarily be everything. It'll depend on the topic. I told you about the topic for gender. There are those who will have a traditional view. There are those who will have a view for change. And I mentioned the Afrikaners' identity so far as them being African. And there are those who will have a traditional view, and there are those who will have a view for change. The view for change is, yes, I might be white, but this is also my land. Right? And they'll believe that, as much as the other person will believe that, no, it's not possible, my brother. You are European. Right? I use that example. Another example, I use also an example of the people who came into or who are coming into the land from other countries and who want to start their lives in South Africa. You saw that liberal or mind for change with Chidima as an example. Chidima, whose parents are Nigerian, but she entered a competition of Miss South Africa. Right? The traditional mindset would say, you are not South African, you cannot enter that competition, you cannot represent South Africans because you are Nigerian. The mentality for change, or the people who are for change on that specific subject, would say, no, she has the right to. She can be part of it. She can go and represent us as South Africans. And you saw South Africa was split. As much as Africa was split, as much as the world was split on that specific subject. So, like I said, it's about a specific subject, and you will always find there's a line in between. There are those who are for tradition, and there are those who are for change. Depends on the subject. And they'll support the NGO that's for that, and the NGO that's against that, the party that's for that, the party that's against that, and an end. It's just that for you to understand politics in any country, except for China or parties with countries with one party. With America, there's a two-party system. There's the Democrats, who are for change, liberal, progressive mentality, and then there is the Republican Party, which is traditional and right. In South Africa, it depends on the subject that you are talking about. There's no traditional party, there's no liberal party. The parties in South Africa they mold themselves to the climate of what the people want at the time. Some or most parties. Another example would be when it comes to the role of women in society. The traditional would say a woman's role is to take care of a family, and a man's role is to go out and hunt for the family, or work for the family, or bring home the bacon for the woman to cook. Traditional mindset. Liberal, progressive, or mindset that's for change would say, actually, we are equal. Right? And I didn't say the traditional mindset doesn't say we're equal. The traditional mindset says we are different. This side on change would say we are equal. It's kind of the same difference, just said in a different way. On this side, they'll say the role of a woman is not to wash clothes or to cook at home or to take care of the kids. The father can also do that. We are the same. Or you'd find even the case where there are women who earn more than their men. There are men who stay at home and the woman goes out to work. And the roles are reversed. That's a more liberal. And you'll find that the woman is taking a leading role, as opposed to in the traditional sense, you find the man is taking the leading role. With the change mindset, it depends. In fact, for both, it depends on who has the most amount of money. With tradition, it'll just be accepted because that's what tradition is. Tradition says the man is the head of the household. With the change mindset, might say there's no leader in the house. We are equal, number one, or the one with the money is the one that's leading. Right? And there might be other examples. Typically with the change mindset, there's never a straightforward type of an answer. There's always another answer. There can be another answer. There can be another answer. An example would be, there can be gays, there can be lesbians, but after that there can also be males. There can be males who are attracted to females, but they have to dress like females to be attracted to females. Or, you get what I'm trying to say? It keeps changing. There's no specific, it changes. And like I said, it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just the nature of the progressive or liberal mindset or the mindset of change. Nothing ever stays the same type of a situation. There's always something changing. As opposed to the traditional mindset, this is what's been tried and tested. This is what nature says. This is how things have been happening for years and years. And this is how things should remain the same. And let's take small steps of change type of a situation. As opposed to the side where the steps are kind of drastic. And I don't want to make the video a long video, but it's a video of, instead of just going on autopilot or going with the wind, it's you understanding that on this particular subject that's coming through, am I a traditional person or am I a person for change? It's the same when it comes to voting. Let me use an example. The EFF can be traditional in a sense of saying Africa is for Africans. Maybe the EFF is a bad example, but let's just stick to EFF because half the time I'm confused with what the EFF is about. And then their change mindset would be South Africa is for Africans. They might not outright say it, but in life, you must judge people by what they do and not what they say. They might say we are putting South Africans first. And then when you look at their actions, you see that actually they are not traditional in that sense. They're actually, on this specific subject, they are for change. And change is a different type of society. Same as the ANC. Or for EFF, a society that accepts or welcomes Africans or other Africans. With the ANC, people tend to think the ANC is traditional in the sense of they are for black people. But the ANC is very for change. The ANC, and this is my gripe with the ANC, they will take the votes of the people of the masses who are predominantly black. And then out of taking those votes, they'll come out and say, we are non-racial, we are non-classist, I don't know if they say that, Rainbow Nation, we are for all. They are for all at the expense of the black people at the masses. And over time, people are starting to sober up to that mentality of maybe, or not necessarily maybe, but seeing that ANC is actually a party that's for change, not a party that's for tradition. That is why they are aligned to parties like the DA. The DA is a party that's for change, not a party necessarily that's for tradition. A white party that's for tradition is that Afrikaner party, I forget. They are for tradition as opposed to for change. Their tradition would be more aligned to that apartheid mentality. They might not be calling for apartheid, but their mentality is still there. It hasn't changed. They see themselves as traditional in that sense, and they might look at DA as a party for change because they're accommodating. They accommodate a lot of other races. Whereas the ANC should have behaved like that Afrikaner party for black people and prioritized the masses and the black people. And then second, would look at other races and accommodating other races. Because that's how you do, or that's what you do for a country. Everyone has to be involved. But you must always know your priorities. So anyways, I was doing this video to kind of shed some light maybe on how I see things. And I think this is how really things should be seen in terms of the world. And other people do see things this way. That when it comes to certain issues of the community, of the country, of the world, of the races, there are only two boxes. There's the traditional box and there's the box that wants change. The question is, which box do you fall under? And remember, you falling under that box doesn't necessarily mean that your entire life is around that specific box. It's about which box do you fall under on a specific topic. I remember I mentioned genders, races, nationality, on other people coming to the country, on finding work, on workplaces, all these things that are part of life that determine what party is actually for what you want. Which box do they tick the most? You might find that they don't tick that box 100% of the time. Sometimes they've got a bit of change, sometimes they've got a bit of tradition. But that's how you look at who you vote for. And I'm saying this because a lot of black people in the masses freely vote for parties like the ANC and the EFF and the MK party and all these other parties purely based on the fact that thinking that they are for them. and them not actually understanding which things do they actually represent, which box do they represent on certain subjects that are important to you as a person. Say a typical example would be the PA. The PA's number one priority is colored people. There's no confusion about that. Remember I said the ANC's number one priority should be black people in the masses. They should never be confused about that, because you find that certain black people in the middle class are more aligned to the DA. Even though there are people in the masses, you can be in the masses and have a middle class mentality. You can be in the middle class and have a masses mentality. Right? So it's important whenever a certain party comes out, you do not judge them by what they say, but you judge them by what they do. A last example I'll use is when black people are being shot in that place somewhere in KZN by Indian people. And the DA would say, we are for all people. But if you remember correctly, they had posters where they said, we see you people as heroes. They were talking to the Indian people who were defending their place or their suburb against the black people at the time who were looting. But what people saw is that DA said they supported the Indians shooting the black people and they took them as heroes. And again, that might not necessarily be the case, or there might have been confusion in terms of the messaging there, we don't know. But like I say, support people based on not what they say, because they all have their nice words and they'll tell you about their manifestos. And the majority of people, and remember the majority of videos that I do are for the people in the masses, a majority of people in the masses do not care or do not have the time to go through a 800 page or 10 page or 50 page or 300 page manifesto talking about what your party represents. What they do is judge you by your actions. It's just understanding which boxes that party ticks for you and what matters the most for you.